Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talking Points with Preferred Health Magazine. Today on the show, we're joined by travel heiress and storyteller Linda Perillo, the dynamic force behind Perillo Tours, one of the most trusted names in luxury travel. Linda takes us beyond the glossy brochures and jet-set life to share the untold stories behind the journey in her brand new memoir, Your Payment Method Has Been Declined. A witty, heartfelt, and widely entertaining look at life, family, and the unpredictable world of travel. Buckle up. This is one trip you don't want to miss.
Chat with you. I
Same
read your
here.
I read your book. It was super interesting to read about your family and learn about you. And it's funny, I actually remember your father's commercials. I'm from
Oh
Long Island
yeah.
originally, and they
Oh
were
my God,
on
yeah.
every single network
Yep.
growing up, the Perillo tours. And I have so many questions and just kind of
Good.
starting. Um, Obviously, you wrote a book about your life, your 8 children, your parents,
Mhm.
faith. What made you decide, okay, I have so much going on in my life. Now's the time to write a book? I know you've studied journalism in the past,
Mhm.
but what made you really think, I'm going to put all my words down finally and publish?
I think there were several catalysts, right? So I had been thinking about writing a book, I mean, for years. This took me like 7 years almost, at least, from conception to birth.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was COVID, right? We were in, and I'm like, okay, now we're going to do it. Now we're going to do it. Now we're going to do it. And as COVID happened, other things happened, right? My finances, you read about that in there, the trust, the trustees, then divorce. And one of the biggest catalysts, I think, to finishing the book was when I completely tore my Achilles kickboxing and I was
Mm,
grounded. And, sometimes we learn, Rachel, that God sets us up and what we feel in front of us is so unpalatable, so unimaginable, horrible. I'm going to be grounded. I can't do it. It was a setup for me to finish this. And it was a call to duty and a call to order to finally get it done. So I think there was a combination of things. There were feelings that I felt needed to get out. There was a purge. And then there was circumstance that made me have to finish it. And I think everything just kind of all came together. It was a perfect storm.
right. And you were so detailed with everything. I'm a mom myself. I have 2 children, but the attention to detail you had, remembering in detail the birth of all your children, what went down. These notes that you have you always been a journal keeper? Or was this all from your own memory? I was assuming you kept a journal your entire life to remember all of these little details. I only have 2 kids and I barely remember their births. Like,
It's funny because my brother said the same thing. He's like, "Oh my gosh, what did you journal all this?" And I said, "No, everything was from memory." But I think as a mom, and you'll get this, as a
mhm,
mom, there are certain things that are indelible in your head, right? Certain circumstances. You could probably, if I said to you, Rachel, tell me
mhm,
about the birth of your 2 children, you probably would, and even 30 years from now, be able to recount what went on that day, how you
right.
got there, how this little thing came into the world via
Mhm,
you, right? And I think there's the things that you just don't forget. I'm sure there's stuff along the way, like my kids will say, "Mom, don't you remember?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh," that I did not forget, but that I did forget. But being a journalist, I think also too, you kind of have a memory that is like an elephant,
mhm.
and that's what journalism is. You have to remember the details, as you pointed out. You got to remember the fine points. And I didn't write a lot of this down. I got to admit, I just didn't until I wrote the book.
Mhm. And faith plays a really important role in your life. And I feel like there's so many cultures and religions and
Mhm.
faith-based programs out there. What advice would you have for somebody going through a really tough time and they're struggling with their faith?
Well, so, religion has always been obviously from reading the book, right? It's
Mhm.
always been a grounding for me. It's been a focal point. My aunt was a nun. I spoke about her in there. My mother was very faithful. I'm faithful. I'm a practicing Catholic. Now, putting that aside for a second, forgetting all the strictures of whatever religion you belong to, it's about what you believe and it is about your faith. And I think one of the things that I learned, and people need to understand about faith, is that it's a gift. And what I mean by that, it is a total relinquishing. of any human control you think you have and saying, God, just help me and steer me. And I finally got to the point, Rachel, where I said, I don't have anything left except to do that. And it doesn't mean as a human being, I didn't have my moments when I said, bleep this and
Hmm.
screw that. Like you're supposed to be taking care of me. I mean, all this time I spent praying and this and that. And what ends up happening, I believe, is that somehow when you start to pray and you start to rely on your faith, what you're asking for at that moment may never come to fruition. But what might happen is something else down the road that you never expected or a solution that you didn't expect. And it may not be instantaneous. So we have to allow faith to cultivate within us, right? I don't care what religion you are. Faith is a great thing. We can't see it, put our finger on it. It's about prayer and belief in whatever that being is to you
Right.
to help you heal.
Exactly. Now, did your children, and so for listeners and readers who don't know, you are a mother of eight. Were there any times when your children said, Mom, please don't write about this in the book? Or did you kind of run some topics by your children and say, is it okay if I talk about this?
Yeah, yes and no. A little bit as we went along. But what I did promise them was that whatever I wanted to say about them was really going to be about them when they were little.
Hmm.
And it was going to be more humorous,
Hmm.
capturing who they were, their personalities, because, I always say I have eight kids. I didn't implant personality discs in them. They are what
Hmm.
they are, right? And if you're a good parent, you recognize who your kid is and you try to steer that being rather than create that being, right? So I had to approach each of them in a different way. And I tried to capture their personalities as they were children, because that's really the most interesting part of their lives, right? Looking back as a mom, when you were a
Right.
baby, you did this or that. And then I stopped because I didn't think it was fair to move on with them as pre-adults or adults. So we could all enjoy those memories of when they were kids, and it still
Mhm.
captured who they are because I'll tell you, the personalities are there from the get-go. And they still are the way they are today, but now they're more grown than they were in the book.
Exactly. And tell, for those who don't know, listeners and readers, you wrote a lot about the impact that your wonderful parents had on you. Obviously, your father in particular, he was affiliated with Perillo Tours. Can you tell people who don't really know too much about your family, about your mother and your father and their life and what they taught you? It's a very loaded question, I know, because there's
No,
so much about them. But for
it,
those who don't
it
know, who was Mario Perillo to start off?
Well, it's loaded but simple at the same time, right?
Right.
Because as you know, my father was second generation in this country, and he started out as an attorney, as did my grandfather, and two of my father's brothers were also attorneys as well. They were four boys. My mom, so I'm first generation Italian here, right? Italian is my first language. My mom was an immigrant. And really, even though my father ended up, once he took a I would say legal immigration, like he was an immigration lawyer to begin,
Mhm.
right? So once the wave of immigration stopped, he's like, what are we going to do for money here? So he started to bring the people back to visit their roots that had become immigrants and had children and grandchildren here, right? So he marries my mom and raises a very traditional Italian family despite becoming very successful and wealthy and having really what was at the time an unprecedented empire within the travel industry, right? But he kept his morals, he kept his scruples, he kept his ethics, and he kept his love and passion for his family. His
Mhm.
family from when he grew up that got him here. And for me and my mom and my three siblings, there was never deviation. And I was just thinking the other day, it's a shame. My mom and I were attached at the hip, but I don't have any pictures of her in my book. And I think one of the reasons is no iPhone at the time. You know how easy it is now to have a phone? Now you had to dig up pictures, right? She died when I was 28. I had just had my first baby.
Mhm.
And that was a huge transition for me to not have her here for my children
Right.
and for me. So, but P.S., going back to what you asked, she was such a good mom that she taught me 28 years until she died of how to
Mhm.
do it. And it's osmosis,
Mhm.
really. She never sat me down and said, let's do. I mean, so many things that I think today, unfortunately, it's getting watered down within the generations. They're very worried about a rubric. They're worried about what their kid is doing compared to somebody else's kid.
Mhm.
Stop. Go back to roots, recognize your kid, and do what my parents did. There were very basic corridors, very basic roots. And a lot of that goes back to stability in the home and the family and doing what you're supposed to be doing, basically.
I know you've spoken about this on podcasts before, but if somebody has never been to Italy and they want to go and they're coming from America, I know again, it's a big question. Italy's a beautiful place. I have been there.
Course.
Um, where, what is some travel advice that you have for an American who's traveling to Italy for the first time, whether they have roots there or they don't, and they're just
Mhm.
checking out all the different amazing attractions and cities?
Well, I'm not going to try and sell Perillo tours, but what I will say is that you really need, I feel, again, this is personal preference and having done both as somebody that's traveled since I was a child. If you can get on a tour where you're protected, your itinerary is set, maybe some of your meals are set, and you have a guide to tell you, we're doing this today, we're going to be here at this time and that time. And again, it's like faith again, right? Relinquishing all those burdens of travel and fear of being in a different place. That's the way to do it. Italy is a very large country and its regions are so diverse. You come from the south where you have Sicily, and then you move up the boot, and now you're in Rome, and then you go up to the north where it's very industrial, and the food is different, and the color, the cuisine is different, the people are different, the dialects are completely different. So,
Right.
again, you kind of got to zoom in on what do I want from this trip, and then direct. I always say a tour is the best way to get a taste of everything.
Definitely. And jumping back to your book, you spoke a lot about your childhood. You grew up in New Jersey, you're a
Mhm.
Jersey girl, I would
Mhm.
say, or you
Mhm.
would probably
For
say
the most
too.
part, yeah.
Right, exactly. And you had a really interesting childhood, a lot of siblings, a lot of food, family, good friends.
Mhm.
Um, if you could go back to your 12-year-old self, what advice would
Oh.
you give 12-year-old Linda? Mhm.
Oh my gosh, I have often thought of this, right? Because we try to impart this. I always say I'm 58 now, this 58-year-old knowledge on my 12-year-old or my 13-year-old or my girls. It's hard to explain how important self-esteem is, right? And how important it is to have your emotions and to be able to express them, but know when to express them, right? One of the things as Italians that we do, unfortunately, is we just fly off the handle. We talk like this really fast. We get really mad, and I did that my whole life. And guess what? It really didn't serve me. So I would tell my 12-year-old self, you know what? Like, love, it's so trite. Again, love who you are. You know, recognize your talents and stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop comparing your beauty. Stop comparing your talents to others. And it's so, especially with girls, so hard, Rachel. I mean, it is really difficult, right?
Oh, I know. I have two daughters and I
Oh,
grew up with two
good.
sisters and I myself was girl. But one scene in the book that struck out to me was you grew up with, a wonderful family surrounded with great morals, great
Mhm.
schooling. You said you always like to dress up and look
Oh,
presentable, and I
yeah.
understand that as well. But you also said like you couldn't stop obsessing about your hair sometimes, or why does my hair
Oh,
look like this, or why does my
yeah.
and it's interesting how like people might have looked at you as a child and been like, well, she's privileged. She has this great life. What is she upset
Yes.
about? But it was interesting in your book to kind of remind the reader, okay, you can argue I had a nice childhood, great
Hmm.
parents, but you were kind of going through the typical emotions at the end of the day.
Oh,
You were a
God.
regular kid going through, those girl emotions of obsessing about your
Hmm.
appearance and hoping your friends like you and that kind of
Of
stuff.
course.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the thing is too, right? When you have a mom who and it's true, she was very, very classy, but you have to remember, she was an immigrant. She grew up in this country when she was 4. She always wanted me to be better, right? So I always had the better clothes. And we did try to control my hair. I had this very curly, ethnic hair, ethnic body. I
Mhm.
mean, I speak in there, right, about how I went to school with a lot of girls that didn't have all these things that now I look at and I go, okay, now I stand out. I've learned how to deal with the hair and do all this stuff. But I think there was, and I'm not going to say pressure, it was a mother's love to want me to be different. And I still think that the concept there is right. Stand
Mhm.
out, be above, right? We want to do better. But then in a child's mind, what ends up happening sometimes is I think we go, well, but I want to fit in, you know? So it's a really slippery slope. And I hate to say this, that I've overcome it now for the most part, but I
Mhm.
think we still, no matter how much therapy we've been through, and I have, we still find ourselves slipping back sometimes into those old modes, right? This is why we say childhood, that's the slate. You really got to work on your kids growing
Mhm.
up and do the right thing all the time. And
100
we, right?
100%. Oh, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. And just, again, obviously we're called preferred health. So right now, present day, what are you doing to take care of your health, body, mind, and soul?
Body, mind, and soul. Let's start with the body. Okay, I was I'm 4 to 5 days a week workout. I have to be careful because of my Achilles, and I
Mhm.
also have a double hernia, which I have not addressed, and I'm still working out with this, but it's the only way this Italian body is going to stay in shape, right? So I do boxing 4 days a week. I
Cool.
was doing Orange Theory. I loved it. I think I
Mhm.
should go back because the cardio and the legs, you don't really get as much leg work in with boxing. But if
Mhm.
I don't work out, I don't feel healthy. And I'll do it at 5:30 in the morning is my class. I'm home by 6:15, 6:30 in the shower, and it's done for the day. I don't lag, right? Mind. Mind to me is even more important than the body because without the mind, without a healthy mind and a functioning mind, you're not going to do anything, right? So I think one word for me is so important, and it's therapy. And I think, and I have a wonderful therapist. I've known her for 30 years, right? So we have a very different relationship now than we did when I started.
Mhm.
But that being said, everybody needs it. I don't care who you are, what your job is, how perfect you think you are.
Mhm.
We need that. And it's not to perfect ourselves, it's to reflect on ourselves and to make ourselves better. And I say that in quotes. We learn to react better. We learn to hold back. One of my things is I react, right? I'm very reactive and then I blow it up and it spins out of control. To be able to say, Linda, take this moment, breathe, come back to this in an hour, and you're going to see it's not as big as it was. That's my issue, right? So the mind, to work on the mind and find something that you love to do, whether for me it's writing, my children, cooking, doing stuff with my kids, doing stuff with my husband, you have to find that little corner of your world or this isn't going to work, right? And so, listen, church, what can I tell you? I mean, I pray every day. And again, it doesn't have to be this crazy, nutty pre-Vatican II prayer ritual because it's not for me. There's
Mhm.
certain aspects of Catholicism that I put on a shelf and I go, wait a minute, we're supposed to be working on forgiveness and kindness here because that's what Jesus asked us to do. So I approach my faith with saints, with Mass on Sunday, daily prayer, but more of a conversation with God and really simple, very simple, Rachel. I just say, please help me today because you know what's ahead. I
Mhm.
don't.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And that's it. And again, we spoke about this. Everyone has their form of faith, or we hope. We hope.
Mhm. Right. It's interesting because it's 2025, and sometimes I meet people who are they have a nervous stigma about being in therapy. And part of me is like, everyone's in
Oh,
therapy. It's like cool now. It's
stop.
trendy. Everybody goes. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's
Afraid of.
interesting.
We need that. We need that
Hmm.
professional guidance to almost stop and say, like an the Italian household. Yeah, it's like ringing in my head, going,
Hmm.
"What are you worried about? Stop that. That's silly." You need a professional to say, "Now, wait a second. Let's take a
Hmm.
step back. Let's go through this." And honestly, the one thing I learned, Rachel, that's so important, you can't control other people, right? You can control your reaction to other people. And
So
that is
true.
how you can get out of a conversation, make a conversation go better. Because if people are unaware of themselves, which we know this, right?
Hmm.
Probably 80% of the people you talk to are unaware of themselves and
Right.
need therapy.
Hmm.
But
Oh,
your
yeah.
reaction to them
Hmm.
changes the entire path. You can't scream back. You can't, how do you stop an argument? Oh, and it's an art and it
Hmm.
is painful learning.
Right. I'm smiling and laughing because all my best friends are Italian. So I know, and I'm a Spanish Jew. So I know what it's like to grow up in a family that's just
Oh,
like that.
oh,
Yeah, I get it.
histrionic. I said I grew
Right.
up histrionic over
Hmm.
nothing, over
Right.
stupid stuff. It was like, oh, mamma mia, blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh. I get
And
it.
that's,
I totally
but
get
we're
it. I grew up
beautiful
similar.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Such
you
a
know
great
what?
culture.
We're
Hmm.
passionate. And I say
Hmm.
that too. That is passion.
Hmm.
And it's a good thing too.
Hmm.
We just have to find a way to channel it and use it properly.
Exactly. I completely agree. And kind of in wrapping up, what's the takeaway that you want readers to have from your book? Like, what is the number one message that you want, readers to walk away with? And also, please tell us how you came up with the title for your book.
Oh, well, starting out with the title,
Hmm.
ever since I went through this when my father died with the money, and you'll read that in the trust and everything. I mean,
Hmm.
I couldn't keep myself afloat, and
Right.
I'm just now starting to come out of that eggshell
Hmm.
of repair. But it's been horrible. So your payment method has been declined. I'm like, this is the title, man, because this is my life with
Hmm.
everything. Um, I think the message from my book should be empathy and to not judge, because just like you said, I think people would look at me and go, "Oh my God, look at her. Her hair's done. She's got her makeup on. She's dressed. Her father is who she is. She must have a gazillion dollars. Oh my God, he died. She must have inherited all this money and her life is so simple." You never know. And that's a big thing, is to pull back on judgment. And again, we will react to people differently when we don't judge so quickly. And if that's the message I can get out, to have empathy, because empathy is more important than sympathy, right? You can be sympathetic. It's empathy so that you can go, you know what, Rachel? I'm glad you told me that story. And even though I don't understand, I am here. What can I do? Because obviously this is difficult for you. I don't know about your scenario, right? And that's what I want. I want to teach the world some
Right.
empathy.
That's great. And that's such good advice. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed your book. It was so interesting to read about your family. I really think that we're happy to promote your book. I think more
Thank
and more
you.
people should know about it. It's an honor
It's,
to chat with you.
and that's a big ditto anytime.
Thanks for tuning in. And to get yourself a copy of Linda Perillo's new book, Your Payment Method Has Been Declined, please visit her website at www.theotherwoman.shop. And until next time, be well and live in gratitude. Take care for now.